"I'm sorry, sir, if you're not in the system, we can't help you today." That's what they told him at the VA hospital. Could a forgotten veteran hold a secret that would change everything? He stood there quietly holding a paper that no one would read with a leg that never healed. "I was at Kisan," he said once softly, but no one looked up until the hospital director stepped forward, took his arm gently, and said, "You're not in the system because men like you built it," and then she walked him inside. Like she was guiding history itself. Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The wind outside carried the quiet bite of late October. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk like dry whispers as the automatic doors of the Roanoke VA Medical Center slid open and let in another wave of cold air. Inside, the waiting room buzzed with that low, familiar hum, papers shuffling, tired coughs, the occasional muted call from a nurse. Veterans sat in lined-up chairs, their expressions blank like the morning light had never quite touched them. Some stared at the television on the wall, though no one really watched it. Most just waited. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and vending machine coffee. Walter Jennings stepped inside with the hesitant weight of someone unsure he still belonged anywhere. He didn't move fast, he couldn't anymore. His left leg dragged slightly, stiff at the knee. His jacket was clean but faded, a dull army green with the elbows rubbed smooth. His boots were old and so was the paper folded tightly in his hand. A yellowed scrap with a handwritten note and a doctor's name barely legible. He took off his hat, an old boonie cover from another era, and held it respectfully at his chest as he walked up to the front desk. The receptionist didn't look up at first. She was busy typing, her nails clicking quickly against the keyboard. Walter waited quietly, patiently. After a few seconds, she looked up, her voice clipped, businesslike. "Good morning, name and appointment time." Walter cleared his throat softly. "I don't have an appointment, I was told I could come in. See a doc about my leg, it's been acting up again." She frowned and began typing. "Full name, Walter Jennings, that's Jennings," she typed, then paused. "Date of birth, March 7, 1942. Another pause, her brow furrowed. "There's no record of you in the system, Mr. Jennings. Are you sure you're enrolled in VA care?" Walter gave a small, tired smile. "No, ma'am, never sign up proper. I wasn't much for hospitals after I got out, but I figured after all these years, I could just come in, maybe get this leg looked at, that's all." She stared at him for a moment, then leaned forward slightly, voice firmer now. "Sir, I'm afraid if you're not in the system, we can't process you without documentation. Do you have proof of service? DD-214 or enrollment confirmation?" Walter slowly unfolded the paper in his hand. "This here's all I've got. It's from a doc I saw long time ago. Said I should bring it here if the pain came back." She glanced at the paper. No letterhead, just a name, a scribbled note, and a phone number that looked disconnected from another century. She sighed. "Sir, I'm sorry, but without proper paperwork, we can't." Another staff member walked over, curious now. A security officer stood quietly nearby, arms crossed. Walter spoke again, calm, steady. "I served in a special operations unit, Laos mostly, but before that, Kisan." He paused, looked down at his leg. "This one never healed right." There was a long silence, then the security officer stepped forward. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside, sir. We can't have you blocking the check-in line." Walter blinked slowly, then nodded once. He moved to the side of the counter, leaning slightly against the wall. He didn't argue, he didn't raise his voice, he just held his hat a little tighter. Behind him, the check-in line resumed. Patients moved past without looking. A few glanced his way, but not long enough to make it mean anything. Walter stayed standing, his leg trembled slightly beneath him, the pain coming in slow, biting waves, but he kept his back straight. The security officer hovered nearby, arms still folded. Walter spoke again, but this time his voice was barely more than a breath. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to sit down, maybe get this leg checked. It's been stiff for weeks now, and it's starting to go numb." No one responded. He looked around the room at the people in their seats, younger veterans, older ones, some in wheelchairs, some with canes, but all of them had ID cards, files, proof he had memories and scars and silence. Could this rejection uncover a buried legacy? Walter took a step back toward the exit doors, then stopped. The receptionist called out, not unkindly, but firmly, "Sir, I really am sorry." He nodded, no bitterness, just a kind of resigned tiredness, like someone who had seen this scene before, just with different characters. Walter turned toward the waiting area one last time. Rows of chairs, plastic armrests, metal legs. He didn't sit, he stood near the far wall, gently pressing a hand against his knee. He whispered to himself, "She used to act up when it rained, now she complains all year long." The security guard approached again. "Sir, if you're not checked in, I'll have to ask you to leave the facility rules." Walter didn't move, he just looked down at the old leg that used to jump out of helicopters, run through jungle mud, carry a friend on his back through enemy fire. Now it barely carried him to the door. "I was at Khe Sanh," he repeated softly. "That's all I've got to say." Nobody heard him. Or maybe they did, but didn't know what to do with the words, so they let them fall just like the leaves outside. And Walter Jennings, 81 years old, decorated in silence, missing in paperwork, stood against the wall in a building built for men like him, and waited for someone to notice. Dr. Olivia Brooks stepped out of the elevator, clipboard in hand, her heels clicking crisply across the tiled floor. It was a Monday, and she hated Mondays, not because of the patients, but because of the bureaucracy, meetings, policies, audit reviews. The paperwork never slowed, and today was no different. She had a morning conference with 2 regional supervisors and a procurement officer who thought veterans only needed what could be budgeted, not what was deserved. But Olivia was never just a manager. She'd served 3 tours, 1 in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan. She'd worked on the battlefield and in field hospitals, holding pressure on wounds while mortars shook the dirt around her boots. She hadn't always planned to become director of the Roanoke VA Medical Center, but after she lost her husband, also a soldier, and buried her mother in the same year, she'd returned to her hometown. It felt like the only place left that still meant something. And this hospital, it wasn't just a building. It was supposed to be the one place where no veteran would ever feel forgotten, but that promise had become harder to keep. As she passed through the main lobby, Olivia caught a murmur in the air, not loud, just the kind of shift in atmosphere that happens when something isn't right. Her steps slowed across the lobby near the check-in desk. A man stood quietly against the wall, older, slim, slightly stooped. His coat was worn, his boots cracked. In one hand, he held a hat, in the other, nothing, no phone, no clipboard, no plastic card. Just stillness. A security guard stood a few feet away from him, arms crossed, at the reception desk. The woman working morning shift leaned toward her coworker, whispering something clearly uncomfortable. Olivia didn't know why, but she stopped walking. Her grip tightened slightly on the clipboard. She had seen that stance before, not here, not like this, but in a black and white photo, one her mother used to keep in a wooden frame, tucked deep in a drawer. A photo she only showed Olivia once. It was grainy, worn at the edges, a jungle in the background, 2 soldiers in the foreground. One was clearly wounded, bandage on his chest, slumped over. The other stood behind him, upright, almost holding him up, a hand under the armpit, a rifle strapped tight to his back. His face was turned just slightly enough to see a hardened jaw, the shadow of exhaustion. But the photo had been taken mid-step. There was something haunting in his posture. Even as a child, Olivia had stared at that photo and wondered. Her mother said the wounded soldier was Olivia's father. He never made it home. His name was etched in black granite now. But the man beside him, we never knew his name. Her mother had said, he carried your father 2 miles under fire, then disappeared before anyone could thank him. That man's stance, it was this man's stance here, now in her hospital. Could this encounter rewrite a family's history? Olivia's breath caught in her chest. She stepped off her path toward the conference room and began walking straight toward the waiting room, calmly but with purpose. She didn't interrupt right away. Instead, she approached the receptionist first. Who was that man? She asked quietly. The receptionist looked startled. Oh, Dr. Brooks, I'm not sure. He doesn't have an appointment, no record in the system. We couldn't verify his ID, no DD-214, no enrollment. We asked him to leave, but, well, he hasn't yet. Olivia looked past her to the man still standing against the wall. His eyes were fixed on the floor, his left leg was shaking slightly, and no one helped him. We had tried, ma'am, but there's protocol. Olivia didn't respond. She just walked forward, past the desk, past the security guard, straight to the man. He didn't look up. Sir, she said gently, may I ask your name? There was a pause, a breath, then he turned his head just slightly toward her. Walter, he said softly. Walter Jennings. Her heart skipped. Mr. Jennings, may I ask what brings you here today? He gave a faint nod, looked at his leg. This thing, he said, tapping the knee with the edge of his boot. Been stiff for weeks, numb sometimes, can't sleep. Thought maybe someone here could take a look. His voice was low and steady, like a man used to explaining things once, maybe twice, but never pleading. Olivia swallowed. Did you serve, Mr. Jennings? He gave her a look, not sharp, not defensive, just tired. Laos 68. Before that, Khe Sanh. Spent most of my time where we weren't supposed to be. She didn't blink. What unit? He hesitated. Recon element attached to him. No patches, no mail, no records. Just orders. Olivia's spine went cold. MACVSOG Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group Black Ops Covert Cross-Border Operations. So secret most of their missions were buried in code names and sealed archives. She had studied the unit in medical school out of curiosity. Most veterans from that group, their names never made it into systems like the VA. She looked him in the eye. Now, Mr. Jennings, did you ever serve with a man named Captain James Brooks? Walter froze, his lips parted just slightly, like the name had yanked something loose inside his mind. Jimmy Brooks, he said after a long pause. He tall, clean-cut kid from Tennessee, used to hum old Johnny Cash songs when we marched. Olivia nodded once quickly before her throat caught. That was my father, she whispered. Walter stared at her. For the first time since he entered the building, emotion broke through the stillness in his face. Something between disbelief and reverence. He blinked slowly, then spoke carefully, deliberately. I carried him off February 68. They said he wasn't going to make it, but I wasn't going to leave him behind, not in that place. I got him to the LZ, then went back for the others. Didn't know if he made it. Olivia didn't realize her hands had begun to tremble. He did, she said. He made it. But he never talked about it, only had one photo. You were in it. They stood in silence. No one else in the room moved, not the guard, not the staff. Even the television seemed quieter. Could this reunion heal a hidden wound? Olivia turned to the receptionist. Get me this man's full chart. I don't care if we have to create it from scratch today. Mr. Jennings is a priority case, the receptionist stammered. Dr. Brooks, we don't have a file for him. Nothing. Then start one, Olivia said. Right now. The guard opened his mouth to speak, but thought better of it. Walter still looked stunned. I didn't come for special treatment, he said quietly. I just needed someone to look at this leg. Olivia gave him a look that cut through years of red tape, decades of silence. Mr. Jennings, you carried my father out of a hell most people can't imagine. You walked into this place without an appointment. You left your name behind a long time ago and still you showed up. She took a breath, her voice steadied. Today, Roanoke VA knows who you are. She extended her hand. He stared at it for a moment, then slowly, gently placed his hand in hers. And for the first time that morning, Walter Jennings sat down, not because he was told to move, not because he gave up, but because someone finally recognized the weight he'd been carrying. Walter sat still in the waiting room chair, his hands resting on his hat, his back straight despite the aching leg. The weight of the years clung to his shoulders, but now, for the first time in a long time, someone had spoken his name, and not just someone. Dr. Olivia Brooks, the daughter of the man he thought had died in that godforsaken valley. He hadn't expected to feel anything. He'd come to the VA that morning expecting indifference, maybe a checkup if he got lucky, but this stirred something he thought had long since gone quiet. The room hadn't moved in minutes. Even the security guard had stepped back slightly, his eyes flicking between Olivia and Walter, uncertain. But that fragile silence was about to break because another staff member, young, confused, unaware of what had just passed between the two, stepped out from a side hallway with a clipboard in hand. She looked up, saw the older man still seated near the check-in counter, and approached. Sir, I'm sorry, but you can't remain in this area without a confirmed file or scheduled appointment. We need to keep this space clear for registered patients. Walter blinked slowly. The moment between him and Olivia hadn't even had time to settle. He nodded politely to the young staffer and began shifting in his seat, reaching for the cane leaning beside him. I understand, he said quietly. I'll get out of the way. The security guard, regaining his posture, stepped forward again. Let's get you to the front, sir. I'll walk you out. But just as Walter began to rise, stop, the voice sliced clean through the room. It came from Olivia. She hadn't raised it, but it carried commanding, unshaken. Everyone turned, even the front desk receptionist froze mid-keystroke. Olivia moved forward with steady, unhurried steps, stopping just inches from where Walter stood. Then, in a single fluid motion, one that felt as sacred as a hymn, she brought her right hand to her brow and stood at full attention, a formal salute, one held for generals, for ceremonies, for heroes, and she gave it to him. Walter didn't move. He just looked at her, looked straight into her eyes, and slowly, his lips parted just slightly. He didn't return the salute. He didn't need to. The room had gone completely still. No one shuffled in their seat. No one whispered. Even the ticking of the wall clock seemed to hold its breath. Then Olivia lowered her hand. She turned slowly to face the entire waiting room, veterans, staff, nurses, even a janitor holding a mop near the far wall, all of them watching. This man's name may not be in our system, she said clearly, because the places he served weren't recorded, the missions he completed didn't come with medals or paperwork, the wounds he carried never made it into official charts. She paused, let the silence settle again. He served in operations that never made the news, in countries we were never officially in. He carried men who never made it home, including my father. Murmurs rippled quietly. Olivia continued. In 1968, my father was wounded during a mission across the Laotian border. The unit was ambushed, radio contact was lost, my father's body was presumed missing in action. But someone carried him through a jungle under fire, 2 miles until he was safe. She looked at Walter again. That someone was Walter Jennings. A breath caught somewhere in the back of the room. We never knew his name, Olivia added, her voice softening now. Until today, the young nurse who'd stepped in moments before now stood frozen, guilt coloring her face. The security guard stepped back instinctively. For the first time, he looked unsure of what he'd done or almost done. Walter shifted slightly, the cane still in his hand. He didn't say anything, his expression was unreadable. But Olivia wasn't done. If the system doesn't remember Walter Jennings, then I will. If the government didn't write his name down, I will say it here. If no file can prove what he did, then let this moment prove it. She turned again to the staff. From this moment forward, any veteran who walks through these doors, whether they have an ID card or not, will be treated with dignity until proven otherwise. That's not just policy, that's human decency. Nobody argued. A silence hung in the air, deeper than any formal order, and then it began slowly. A man in his 60s, wearing a faded navy ball cap, rose to his feet near the coffee machine and nodded toward Walter. Then another army vet by the patch on his jacket stood as well. Soon the entire waiting room was standing. One by one they rose, not clapping, not cheering, just standing, straight-backed, silent, honoring him in the only way they knew how. Could this salute restore a forgotten legacy? Walter looked around, his hand clenched slightly on the cane, the knuckles white. For a second, Olivia thought he might sit back down, that it was all too much, but he didn't. He drew himself up slowly, taller than before. The stiffness in his leg was still there, but it no longer defined his posture. He gave a single nod, not exaggerated, not dramatic, just real. I didn't come for all this, he said quietly. Olivia smiled gently. I know, I just wanted someone to look at this leg. The room let out a faint collective breath, a soft ripple of knowing smiles. Some chuckled under their breath, not mocking, but respectful, human. And then Olivia said, we'll take care of the leg. She turned to the nearby hallway and signaled to a waiting nurse. Prep exam room 3 now. The nurse nodded, scurried off. Walter looked at her. You sure you're not too busy? Olivia shook her head. Not for you, sir, never for you. As he stepped forward, the hallway cleared. Every staff member made way, and as Walter Jennings walked past slowly, carefully, but upright, each one stood a little straighter. Some saluted, others placed hands over their hearts, a few just bowed their heads. But no one sat back down until he disappeared into the corridor, and for the first time in a long, long while, the hospital felt quiet in the right way. The hallway leading to exam room 3 was quiet, except for the echo of slow, deliberate steps. Walter walked with a cane, yes, but now he moved with something else, too. Not pride, not quite. It was something gentler, a sense of being seen. As he passed, the young nurse waiting by the door stood at attention. She couldn't have been more than 28, probably fresh out of school, but her hand went instinctively to her side in a sort of half salute. Walter gave her a nod, not as a superior officer, but as someone who understood what it meant to carry weight. Inside the room, Dr. Olivia Brooks waited with a team of 2 residents and 1 attending physician. She didn't need to be there, not really. Her day was already packed with meetings, calls, and reviews, but none of that mattered right now. Walter sat on the edge of the examination table, his hat placed gently on his lap. The physical went quietly. The scan, range of motion tests, some notes about nerve compression and circulatory issues, all manageable, all treatable. When the young doctor asked how long the symptoms had persisted, Walter answered calmly, since 68. The room fell silent. They didn't ask for clarification, they didn't need to. After the exam, Olivia stayed behind for a few moments. She didn't say much, neither did he, but there was comfort in the quiet. Before she left the room, she pulled something out of her coat pocket. It was old, faded, a black and white photograph. She held it out to him. Walter took it slowly, his fingers trembled just slightly as he brought the photo closer. There it was, that moment, frozen in time, himself, younger, stronger, shouldering a wounded soldier through jungle mud, his face blurred, but unmistakable, and on that soldier's chest, a torn sleeve, the last visible part of a name, Brooks. Walter let out a soft breath. Olivia said quietly, "My mother kept it by her bedside until the day she passed. She used to say, 'One day we'll find the man who didn't ask to be thanked, but deserves it more than anyone.'" Walter looked at her. "I never thought I'd be in a picture someone kept." She smiled. "You were never forgotten, just never found." He nodded slowly. "I's never leaving the photo." "Then I guess I'm home now." Word spread fast. By Tuesday morning, the front desk staff knew. By Wednesday, the nurses on the second floor were asking, "Is that the man from the waiting room?" By Friday, someone from the admin office printed out a brief note titled, "The Man Who Wasn't in the System," and pinned it to the breakroom bulletin board. It wasn't formal, but it meant something. Within a week, maintenance staff came together to replace one of the cracked faux leather chairs in the waiting area, but when they reached for the one Walter had been sitting in, Olivia stopped them. "Leave that one." They hesitated. It was scuffed, one leg wobbled slightly, but she was firm. The chair stayed, and 2 days later, a small engraved plaque appeared beneath it. Nothing flashy, no name, just a line, "For those not in the system," but etched into history. Visitors started noticing. Some asked who it was for. Most simply sat somewhere else. Over time, the chair became a kind of landmark, a quiet place, a symbol. Staff would nod at it in passing. Patients would rest near it, whispering stories about men they once knew, and once a month, like clockwork, a single white rose would appear on the seat. No one ever saw who left it. No one ever asked, could this chair become a lasting tribute? Olivia visited Walter once a week, sometimes in the clinic, sometimes in the small VA residence wing where he'd been offered a room after a full evaluation. He declined the fancy stuff. No suite, no nameplate, just a cot, a bookshelf, and a window facing east. They didn't talk much, but every time Olivia came, she brought the photograph. She never asked him to sign it, never pressured him to tell more stories. She just sat beside him and they shared a silence that held more than words could carry. One afternoon, as leaves began falling heavier outside the window, Walter said quietly, "I didn't carry your father out because I thought someone would remember. I did it because no one else could. That's how it was back then." Olivia looked at him. "That's why we have to remember, because you never asked us to." He nodded once. That was enough. A few weeks later, Walter asked for something unexpected. He wanted to go back to the waiting room, not for an appointment, not for attention. He just wanted to sit in the chair again. They wheeled him in gently that morning. His leg had worsened, age was catching up to him, but when he was finally settled in the seat, the one beneath the plaque, he took off his hat, placed it on his lap, and looked straight ahead. The room wasn't as full that day, a few patients, a few nurses, but the moment he sat down, people noticed. A young Marine vet, no more than 25, rose slowly and stood at attention. A Vietnam-era soldier near the vending machine saluted silently. One by one, people began to stand. No one said anything, and Walter didn't move. He just sat there, eyes forward, back straight, like a man who'd finally been allowed to return to the place he had never really left. Walter Jennings passed away peacefully 3 months later, in his sleep. In the room facing east, the photograph still sat on his nightstand, and next to it, a folded letter Olivia had written him, thanking him not for what he did, but for how he did it, quietly without needing to be seen. At the memorial held in the hospital chapel, Olivia spoke only one line. "He may not have been in the system, but he's written into the soul of this place now." The chair, it's still there, nobody dares move it, and every year on Veterans Day, without fail, someone places a single white rose on the seat. They never say who. They don't have to, because some people never needed records or titles, they just needed someone to say, "You were here and we remember." In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition. Some just need to know that today someone isn't going hungry, and sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.